tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto suchedoye olahadi samya samputoshe.
Namo sadanto suchedoye alahadi samya samputoshe.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. 师父上人，各位师兄，大家阿弥陀佛. Venerable Master, Dharma friends, welcome to our Sutra lecture. Glad you're here. Nice to be with you. My name is Heng. We're going to be looking into the Flower Garland Sutras, chapter 39, called Entering the Dharma Realm, Entering the Realm of Reality, also called Ru Fa Jie Pin in Chinese. And to get us going, let's invoke spiritual presence here and invite you to join me. The melody is the melody that we use when we bow to the sutra. We're doing 3 steps, 1 bow. This is the very same melody that propels that pilgrimage. Here we go. And I want to say that, we'll scroll through these, here we go, depending on where we are, here we go. Say that the Kombumeri people of the Ugambi language region practice spiritual connections to land and to all creation here in this location for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. Today we acknowledge them as traditional custodians and original storytellers of these lands. We offer our respect to the elders past, present, and emerging, and to all First Nations people whose sovereignty was never ceded. Okay, then we move ahead to the last part of our opening, and I've actually brought a special bell. Bell sound wide resounds throughout 100 million worlds. The Buddha's law is heard and spread all throughout the triple world. the wondrous sound that everywhere fills the Dharma realm with peace. May those who hear it gain the strength to follow in faith the Buddha's path. 众生传3000界内，佛法扬万亿国中，恭训其法界和平，利益报他诺后德。There we go. Okay. So, welcome again. We'll be looking into the Flower Garland Sutra now. Catch everyone up where we are. This is the last chapter in a long Buddhist sutra, a lesson taught by the Buddha 2,500 years ago. And this final chapter of this large sutra is a pilgrimage. It talks about how a young man who had particularly strong connections with Manjushri Bodhisattva, the awakened being of great wisdom, came forward and was kind of initiated by Manjushri Bodhisattva to set forth and seek wisdom. And this chapter is known as, there's a title for it. It's the story of how a very relatable young man accomplished Buddhahood in a single lifetime. Yi Sheng Cheng Ban, they say. He became a Buddha in a single lifetime. But it was, if it takes a village to raise a child, it took an entire region to raise a Buddha. In the process of his pilgrimage, he encounters 53 teachers. And this chapter is about his relationship to all of those different teachers. So it wasn't so simple. It wasn't easy at all. And it took him 12 years. And in the process of this journey, this spiritual journey, which is truly an epic, this is an epic story in the best tradition of literary epics of all kinds. In the process, he goes through fear, he goes through joy, he goes through not so much anger. I don't think Sudana ever expresses anger. He's frustrated often and challenged. And he overcomes all of these psychological hurdles that arise to him in the process of his journey. But he is successful in the end. And he is welcomed to his successful moment by another bodhisattva, who is, there are two actually, Maitreya Bodhisattva, plays a big part in Sudana's discovery of his own awakened nature. But most important in the end is a bodhisattva named Samantabhadra, Pushen Posa. The Japanese call him Fugen Bosatsu. So he's Samantabhadra, a Sanskrit name. We call him universally good, universally worthy, universally wholesome, all good bodhisattva. And he's the one who finally answers the pilgrim's question of how to cultivate the bodhisattva path and how to practice the practices of bodhisattvas. So here we are. And if you look around the Buddhist world for a sutra that is so essential to our entire tradition of what's called the Mahayana, the northern tradition, it's little known. Very few people know the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra's name. Much fewer, many fewer, have ever heard a single word of the sutra. But because our founder and our teacher, Xuan Gong Shangren, Master Xuanhua, he told us he brought the Mahayana Dharma to North America in 1962, and it took him a decade to get going on the Avatamsaka. And he said, I want you all to hear the Buddha's voice. I want you to immerse yourself in this big, long story. We're going to be opening this book every night. We're going to spend 90 minutes every night looking into this book, and we're going to translate it on the spot so that you who don't speak Chinese can know what's going on. And then I want you to translate it into the world's languages, he said. So we did just that, 90 minutes of every night at Gold Mountain Monastery and City of 10,000 Buddhas for 9 long years. Master Hua explained the Avatamsaka Sutra, and twice on Saturdays, twice on Sundays. So today we are carrying on that tradition. We're following our teacher's footsteps and continuing to open up the Flower Garland Sutra and make it available to folks. I'm sitting in a magnificent Buddha hall here in southeastern Queensland, and the words I'm saying in English are being translated on the spot into Mandarin for people who want to listen in Chinese-speaking lands, or wherever you are and you want to speak Chinese. And further, we have a Vietnamese translation happening as well, so that elders who haven't learned English yet, or young people who want to brush up on their Vietnamese, can hear the Buddha Dharma in Vietnamese. So we're carrying it on, 3 languages here, and for me, I never dreamed that I would one day be explaining the chapter 39, entering the Dharma realm, the Ganda Vyuha, Ru Fa Jiepin. I never thought that would be part of my lived experience as a Buddhist monk. But conditions arose, we finished the 10 stages chapter, and now I get my chance to bring the story of the pilgrim Sudana, Shancai Tongzi, good and wealthy, wholesome and rich, good wealth, probably is the Chinglish title, Sudana. We call him Sudana Bodhisattva. So here's our story. And where are we now? We're in the preliminaries. We're in the section that is building up to the story getting going. And what has happened is the Buddha announced this Dharma is going to be taught. The hall where he was teaching expanded, whoosh, just grew really large to accommodate the audience that was expected to arrive. And sure enough, from 10 directions came bodhisattva leaders and teams of bodhisattvas and audience and supporters and the curious and maybe the skeptical and the doubt-filled, and also the deep believers and the practitioners of the bodhisattva path all showed up. They all came in, and they made their offerings. They said, we're here, we're glad we're here. And they bowed and made a seat in each of their respective directions, sat down in full lotus and prepared to hear the Dharma. So that's done. We've got that prelude is now in place. And next, what's happening next is something kind of surprising to folks who are new to the Dharma. We're experiencing a schism, maybe a schism, is that the word? Maybe not, that's the right, not the right word. We're experiencing a real life look at the audience, which is to say, in the Buddha's audience, there are Buddhists who are already committed to the religion, they practice, they've had accomplishment, but they're not experiencing fully what's going on right before their eyes. They can't see it, they can't hear what the Buddha is actually doing as he teaches the Dharma. And it explains how come, why this is true. So for people who are familiar with Mahayana teachings, if you've read the Lotus Sutra, for example, the Miao Fa Lianhua Jing, the wondrous flower, the lotus flower of the Dharma. In that teaching, This is said to be the last sutra that the Buddha spoke. If you take his entire 49 years of teaching, his final period is called the Lotus Nirvana period. And during that time, he explained the Lotus Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra. And then he himself entered Nirvana. And during the Lotus period of his teaching, Lotus Sutra period, there were 5,000 people in the audience who, hearing what he said, stood up and walked out in a huff. Unhappy. Didn't like it. They were upset because they said, hey, wait a minute, that's different from what you told us 40 years ago at the start, 48 years ago. What the Buddha said during the Lotus Sutra period that upset everybody was, he said, you know what? He said, all you have to do, if you really want to become a Buddha, he said, you just have to raise your hand in salute to the Buddha. So you have to put your palms together like this, he said, or you have to say Namo Buddha a single time. That's enough. That's a active spiritual seed in your consciousness that over time will transform your entire state into goodness, and you will become a Buddha. That's how powerful my vows as a Buddha are. So Buddhahood guaranteed if you show any sincerity whatsoever. And parenthetically, how much the more if you have taken refuge, taken the precepts, started to cultivate, started to meditate, changed your diet, changed your habits, and listened to the Dharma, how much more so will it be the case that you will become a Buddha. But at the minimum requirements for accomplishment of as they say, the fruition of the path, right? You can experience the liberation from suffering that Buddha's experience if you do as little as, saying Namo Buddha with your palms together. That's all it takes. So hearing this, oh my goodness, 5,000 of the disciples said, wait a minute. We gave up our wives, we gave up our palaces, we gave up our jobs, we gave up our hair, we gave up our status as, fashion icons. We dressed in rags and followed you all these years thinking, and we haven't become Buddhas yet, and yet you're saying that's all, what? So they were upset, and they left. They walked out in protest. So interesting, the point of this is a historical event that pops up, is taken as actual fact. And what it says is there are differences among people. People are complex beings. And even for someone who had followed the Buddha for decades and had indeed renounced what normal people let go of, still, when it came time to open their hearts fully to great compassion and say there's room in the mind, there's room in the Buddha's door for everyone, it was too much. They couldn't accept that. Interesting, huh? And kind of real life, you just realize, currently, politically, my home country, the United States, is experiencing a very strange schism in our own community, just seemingly out of control divisions that just people don't see eye to eye at all about very basic things. So there you go, that can happen. And it happened in the Buddhist community as well. So that's where we are. That's our sutra now. And what's coming up, we heard it last week, the Buddhist said there are differences in what are called shangan, good roots, things, the wholesome qualities that we create by doing things like, paying reverence to great wisdom and opening to compassion. People are not the same in those basic ways. And the result of that can be that as the Buddha is here teaching, and the bodhisattvas who are fully engaged in the Buddha's lessons, there are people sitting right beside him who don't see it, who can't see it, for whom it is partial or foreign, and they are unable to understand what's the potential of the Dharma. So that's where we are. And it's funny because, you assume, Buddhism, we love everybody, right? Well, yeah, we do. But there are differences in hearing and seeing based on why is this? How do we pick one team or the other? How do we cross over? We'll find out today. Okay, there we go. That's our preamble. Let's dig into our text. Okay. Yep, I was reading ahead and I haven't gone back. Here we go. A dream is dreams. Okay. Here we go. Right there. Here's where we start today. Right here. Okay, I want to go down to not Rome, they're in. Right. We'll do the whole page here in Chinese. 复次. Okay, here we go. Ready? Here we go. 复次诸大声闻，无如是善根故，无如是智言故，无如是三昧故，无如是解脱故，无如是神通故，无如是威德故，无如是势力故，无如是自在故，无如是住处故，无如是境界故。是故于此不能知，不能见，不能入，不能证，不能住，不能解，不能观察，不能忍受，不能去想，不能于虑，有虑。Okay, there we go. How's your Chinese? Picking up every week, learning more Buddhist Chinese. Here we go. Moreover, because those Shravakas did not possess such good roots, did not possess such a wisdom eye, did not possess such samadhis, did not possess such liberations, did not possess such psychic powers, did not possess such sublime virtues, did not possess such strengths, did not possess such self-mastery, did not possess such habitations, and did not possess such states. Although they were, therefore, in the same place, but could not know, could not see, could not enter, could not realize, could not dwell in, could not understand, could not contemplate, could not endure, could not approach, and could not roam therein. Okay, those of you who don't know Chinese but who were listening to the patterns heard wu ru shi, right? Wu ru shi, something, 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 10 times. In English, it's did not possess. They didn't have. These 10 things. Look at the list. Good roots. That's literal Chinese, that's Chinglish. If you translate it, it would be wholesome attributes, wholesome characteristics, good qualities. Didn't have the right stuff. That's ordinary English, didn't have the right stuff. So, wisdom, eye, samadhi, liberation, psychic powers, virtues, strength, self-mastery, habitations, and states. Those things were missing. They had all kinds of other wonderful qualities. They were already accomplished meditators. They were kind-hearted people, but they lacked this next step in development of what? Their own minds. Okay? So there they were in the Buddha's assembly in the same place, but they didn't know, see, enter, realize, abide in, understand, contemplate, endure, approach, or travel in what the Buddha was really sharing, what the Buddha wanted them to get. Okay. How to interpret? Think of it as, we've done this before using mathematics. Let's move to music. So let's move to music. So my first experience with music was my parents belonged to the Columbia Music Club, the Columbia Masterworks Music Club, this was the day of the hi-fi, stereo. We had a stereo, we had a turntable and an amplifier and speakers. And my dad was a hi-fi enthusiast, stereophile. And so Columbia Records every week, or was it every month, would send us a big box. And it would come, and it was exciting because you'd open it up, and they had chosen 4 33 1/3 LPs to send to their recording audience, their listening audience. And so it was a subscription service for records. We called them albums or records. And we'd open them up, and it was Harry Belafonte singing songs, calypso songs, and it was Harry Belafonte at Carnegie Hall, one of my favorite albums of all time, of which I can sing every note right now. And then beside it would be Lerner and Loewe Camelot, a Broadway musical. And I learned every note of Camelot with Richard Burton and Julie Andrews. Oh my goodness. And next in the stack would be what? Would be Frank Sinatra, Wee Small Hours of the Morning. And it was a collection of Sinatra's best hits. Following that would be the Kingston Trio at the Hungry Eye Cafe, recorded live in Washington, New York City. And so, mind you, Columbia artists had a big catalog. Wow. They had all these great acts. And they would send these records. And I would listen. And I was probably 12 and 13, 14. And then the next package would be an opera. And then it would be a spoken word album. And just so I was exposed to a great variety of recorded music, and it was wonderful records at a time when it was the folk boom. The Kingston Trio was the beginning. Joan Baez was there, and then Judy Collins, and not with Columbia, but I branched out, and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Pete Seeger, and Bob Dylan, and so this was my first encounter with the variety of music in the world, in America being a place where a lot of this music arose. So it was good timing. And yet I was a consumer and an admirer and a great lover of music, and it inspired me to pick up my dad's baritone ukulele, and then next was a guitar, and then a 12-string guitar, and then a banjo and a mandolin. But I never took the next step into reading music. I lacked basic musical vocabulary to be able to deeply enter and understand from the musician's point of view, what was going on, and the options of musical creation. I learned to sing, and I enjoyed singing, and found friends that way who also liked folk music, and joined a community, but I didn't take the next step into musical training. So my ability to really create my own music stopped there. I could imitate others, I could sing, and I was called an ear-trained musician, but not a well-trained musician. So my ability to really, for example, classical music, to deeply understand classical music, was limited because I hadn't learned the basics of reading music from a staff. And so my ability to progress into music has always been limited by that lack of training, lack of knowledge. And here we have bodhisattvas who are, if we use the analogy, we've got the Shravakas, the sound hearers, the Shungwan, they're called two-vehicle cultivators, they've gone deeply into Buddhism, but they haven't opened up that other part of their nature to different samadhis, to different principles, to different practices, to the vows of bodhisattvas. For example, they hear about Amitabha and the Pure Land, and they don't accept it. They haven't heard the story. They weren't present when the Buddha talked about Amitabha, or they heard it and didn't believe it. That all you had to do was say Namo Amitofo and be reborn there. So part of their training as Buddhists was set apart from them, was not available. They didn't pick it up. Like myself and learning musical composition with notes and staves and rests and all, it didn't happen for me. Likewise, these Shravakas didn't get the next step into the Bodhisattva vehicle. So now that's a clumsy analogy, but you can kind of understand. If you probably more universally understood would be the one that we use about mathematics. Whereas, or wherein, if you went to all the way every step through, elementary school and then on into high school, some of us attended geometry and algebra classes, but stopped there. That was me. I never progressed into trigonometry or calculus. I never learned to use a slide rule. Calculators for me are used only with addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. I can't do factoring or anything. So, and yet other people using the very same mathematics, 0 to 9, took it much further, and calculus and trigonometry and then theoretical math and all of the different functions, engineers, the mathematics that they require. And if you're navigating, you're out on the water and you're doing reckoning, and you have a sextant and you're looking at the stars, you better know mathematics. Even to the point where astrologers calculating birth charts, that was a stretch for me. So same numbers, but a different expression of them. And those who are good with mathematics are free. They are zizai, and they can understand profound, like the positions of pi, they understand how that works, how to factor an equation and all. And that was denied to me. So I can understand and appreciate how right within the Buddha's assembly, half of the group, maybe not so much half, the bodhisattvas know what's going on. They can follow the Buddhas as he displays his skill in teaching. And the other half, the other group, are not interested in learning that because why? They don't want to teach. And if we had to, I'm ahead of myself here, we're going to read more text. But if you wanted to say what's the dividing line, what's the gate that the others didn't want to go through, it's an attitude towards learning and teaching the Dharma. Let's find out more. Let's find out how it works and what's the difference here. Okay, let's see. We're going to go down, and why not? Okay, we'll do the whole page again, another page. Fasten your seatbelt. More Chinese ahead. Here we go. 又亦不能广为他人开阐解说，称扬示现，引导劝进，令其去向，令其修习，令其安住，令其正入。何以故？诸杂弟子亦声闻称而出离故，成就声闻道，满足声闻行，安住声闻果，于无有地得决定智，常住实际，究竟寂静，远离大悲，摄与众生，诸欲自是。于彼智慧不能积极，不能修行，不能安住，不能愿求，不能成就，不能清净，不能去入，不能通达，不能知见，不能证得， 是故虽在十多林中，对于如来不见如是广大深辩。Okay, here we go. Moreover, they could not vastly elucidate, explain, proclaim, advocate, or manifest, guide or exhort others' progress, sending them ahead, getting them to practice and to cultivate, letting them settle down within or to gain realization and accomplishment. And why not? Because all those great disciples relied upon the Shravaka vehicle to make their escape. They had accomplished the Shravaka's path. They'd perfected the Shravaka's practice, and they had settled down in the Shravaka's fruition and obtained decisive wisdom about the truth of non-existence. Ever abiding within the ultimate reality in perfect stillness and quietude, they moved far away from great compassion. They forsook living beings and focused on their own affairs. They could not accumulate the Bodhisattva's wisdom, could not cultivate it, could not settle down within it, could not seek it with their vows, could not accomplish it, could not purify it, could not approach and enter it, could not penetrate it, could not know or see it, could not realize or attain it. Okay, here we go. So, what's it say? It says, the sound hearers, the Shravakas, they were not educators. They didn't want to share, basically. They didn't want to make it someone else's. They held on to their knowledge and took it out. But look at this first paragraph. Elucidate, explain, proclaim, advocate, manifest, guide, or exhort. That's a bunch of synonyms for the same thing. They didn't want to share the Bodhisattva path with others. Why? This is kind of the heartbeat of this whole series. Because they relied upon the Shravaka vehicle to leave birth and death. They had accomplished the Shravaka's path. Hard to do, major accomplishment. They had perfected those practices and settled down into the results of Shravaka's practice. They got real wisdom about the truth of non-existence. And that was enough. They stopped there. Ever abiding within ultimate reality and perfect stillness. What's wrong with that? Well, from the point of view of non-Buddhists, this is an incredible accomplishment. Perfect stillness, ultimate reality, and quietude sounds so good, right? But that takes you away from great compassion. They forsook living beings and focused on their own affairs. Now, to pull it back from criticizing Shariputra and Subhuti, think of it this way. In their own mind, as they were meditating, they got to a certain point and built a fence. They kept the lights out in part of their mansion of Bodhi, right? Their house of wisdom didn't light up. They didn't go to the third floor. They didn't expand the rumpus room for everybody. They didn't open their kitchen to all the hungry living beings. So, as a result of that, they couldn't accumulate the Bodhisattva's wisdom. They didn't cultivate it, settle down in it, seek it with their vows, accomplish it, purify it, approach it, enter it, penetrate it, see it, know it, realize it, attain it. So part of their experience, of the potential experience of the Bodhisattva path, which is your own mind developed to the ultimate, they didn't do it. So puts us in a funny place where we say, well, you can't say shame on them because they're like hugely accomplished living beings. If these Shravakas were to walk in the Buddha hall, we would bow to them in an instant. You know, they've got incredible stillness and purity. They don't have the heart of the Bodhisattva, and so the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is the carrier of the Bodhisattva's teachings, says, sorry, you guys didn't get it. You missed it. Last line, I didn't read this line, one more. 是故虽在十多林中，对于如来不见如是广大身边. Which is why, even though they were inside the Jada Grove, face to face with the thus come one, they could not behold such vast and great psychic powers. Okay? Kind of like they're watching a black and white movie, not a colored film in colors. They're not watching CinemaScope, they're watching black and white, which is a good story. It's a good story, but the colors didn't come out, the lights didn't come on. Okay, I find this fascinating because when you think about the Buddha Dharma, you think, oh well, it's very cool. Everybody's, it's a love fest, right? Very cool. Everybody's hugging everybody and high-fiving. Yeah, but it's like the others, there's a group right within that group. There's this schism, there's this difference. And they're all Buddhists, but there are differences. It's a big family, and there are these distinctions. Okay. All right. We're going to take a little break here. And invite you all to sing along. This line right here. These are the highest blessings. These are the highest blessings. Right? That's your line. It's a Buddha Sutra. Thus I have heard that the Blessed One was staying at Shravasti, residing at the Jada Grove in Anathapindika's park. Then in the dark of the night, a radiant Deva illuminated all the Jada's grove. She bowed down low before the Blessed One, then standing to one side, she said, Okay, 读中文的人，如是我问你是否在舍卫国，其实你给诸诸样景者，是以深夜有一天，神和殊胜光明遍照园中，来至佛所，恭敬礼拜，站立一边。站立一旁，以及拜佛言。Devas are concerned for happiness and ever long for peace. The same is true for humankind. What then are the highest blessings? Okay. So this Devi, the female, Deva, goddess, comes down, lights up the Jada Grove, and asks the Buddha for blessing. She wants to hear him speak Dharma. What are the highest blessings? She wants to know. Okay, so the Buddha proceeds to teach her. He says, avoiding those of foolish ways, associating with the wise, honoring those worthy of honor. Here we go. These are the highest blessings. These are the highest blessings. Buddha goes on to say, 无戒女痴人，应与智者交，尊敬有德者，是为最吉祥。Living in places of suitable kinds with the fruits of past good deeds, guided by the rightful way. These are the highest blessings. These are the highest blessings. 居住是一处，往昔有德者，至圣与正道， 是为最吉祥，是为最吉祥。Accomplished in learning and craftsman skills, with discipline, highly trained, speech that is true, pleasant to hear. These are highest blessing. These are highest blessing. 多闻公益境，言持诸境界，言谈悦人心，是为最吉祥，是为最吉祥。Providing for mother and father's support, cherishing family and ways of work, harm no being. Ready? These are highest blessing. These are highest blessing. 奉养父母亲，爱护其余子，从业要无害，是为最吉祥，是为最吉祥。To be continued. Just a way to clean the mind a little bit before we dig into the next part of our sutra. We will be back with the Mangala Sutta for singing. Okay, here we go. Oops, not that one. Don't want that one. We want this one. Here it is. What happens next? What happens next is a series of 10 analogies. We get 10 little, it's like, ... It's like this, to describe what's going on. So there's a big chunk. We're now in chapter 2, that is to say scroll 2, the Arjan. The sutras used to be divided into scrolls with a central wooden dowel and wrapped up around it like that. So we're in number 2, and a big chunk of scroll number 2 has to do with this story that there was the Buddha, the Dharma's ready to go. He's teaching about the story of Sudana with all of the incredible psychic powers that manifest when the Buddha speaks Dharma. And part of the audience is, you could say, in the dark. Right there, right in front of the Buddha. There's a large part of the audience that doesn't know what's going on. I just had a thought. I'll remember it. What it was like to be in Master Hua's Dharma Assembly. Okay, we'll get to that. So we're going to jump right in now with the first of these analogies, and it's really dramatic. Here we go. 佛子如恒河岸，有百千亿无量恶鬼，裸形饥渴，举体交染，乌鹫豺狼近来搏错，未可所逼，欲求水饮，随住河边而不见河。设有见者见其枯竭，何以故？甚后业障之所复故。彼大声闻，亦复如是，虽复住在十多岭中，不见如来广大神力，摄一切智，无明亦没，夫其眼故，不曾种植沙婆若地， 诸善根故. Disciples of the Buddha, by the shores of the Ganges, of the river Ganges, there are hundreds and thousands of millions of limitless numbers of hungry ghosts who are all naked, hungry, and thirsty. Their entire bodies are scorched and aflame. Ravens, eagles, and wolves rush to seize them. These ghosts are extremely oppressed by thirst. They crave water to quench their thirsts. Though they live by the side of the river, they cannot see it. And once they caught sight of the river, it would instantly dry up. And why? Because they are covered over by their deep and weighty karmic obstacles. The state of all these great Shravakas was similar. Although they stayed in the midst of the Jeta Grove, they could not see the thus come one's vast, great psychic powers. That was because they had renounced omniscience and their eyes were covered by the cataract of ignorance. It was also because they had not planted the good roots of the various stages of sarvajña, which is omniscience. All right, there we go. Take a look. Here's the first of 10 analogies, and it's really dramatic. The Buddha says, here we are by the shore of the Ganges River, and what does he see? He sees hundreds of thousands of millions of limitless numbers of hungry ghosts, preta, uagwe. They are naked, hungry, thirsty. Their bodies are scorched and aflame. They're being devoured by ravens, by carnivorous birds, eagles, and wolves. Interesting that ravens and eagles get mentioned as meat eaters who are oppressing the hungry ghosts. These ghosts are thirsty. They crave water, and they're right beside the riverbank, but guess what? They can't see the water. And if they can see it, it dries up. Torture. They're being tortured. Why? Covered over by deep and weighty karmic obstacles. Okay, that's the first, it's an analogy. So the analogy says what? It gives you a picture of something that you can visualize, and then it says, this is the same. You can't understand this directly, so it gives us something in between that we can picture, and then by extension, the other comes clear. So, hungry ghosts, oh my goodness, pretas, they say that their stomachs are as big as a bass drum, but their throats are the size of a needle. So hunger is a constant affliction, and thirst, but how much food and water can you get down through a needle-sized throat? So their suffering goes on and on and on. And it's not irony, is not the word. The sadness of their being right beside a river which could quench their thirst, but they can't see it. And if they do catch sight of it, the water teases them and dries up. Okay, now the Buddha describes this, and we think, wow, that sounds really cruel. That sounds really harsh. Why is the Buddha so cruel and harsh to say these things? And you think, no, that's not it. This is reality. The Buddha is describing a situation in the realm of ghosts, the realm of pretas. It's below the realm of animals, and it's above the realm of hell beings. So from the Buddhist point of view, animals suffer short, painful lives full of suffering, but that's nothing compared to the ghosts who have this existential misery in their lives. And below them are hell dwellers who suffer even more. So, okay, we got the ghosts. And then the Buddha says, you know what? The sound hearers, the Shravakas, the voice hearers, just the same. They're right there in the Jeta Grove, and they could understand the liberation of bodhisattvas, and furthermore, go on to teach the way bodhisattvas can teach living beings. But they can't see it. They can't see what the Buddha wants them to see. because they renounced omniscience. This is sa po ro, right? 一切智. They didn't pursue it. Their eyes were covered over by ignorance to this degree, and the stages of sarvajña, which is what sa po ro di, that's the Sanskrit word that's translated as 一切智. They, all knowledge, all wisdom, omniscience. They hadn't taken all the steps towards omniscience. They hadn't reached for it. They hadn't made the vows. When other people were saying, I'm going to stay in samsara to help others leave and I'll go last, they had already exited. They didn't make that bodhisattva's resolve. The putishin, the two sides of the bodhi resolve, weren't real for them. So, okay, that's our first one. How about that? Whoa. Like hungry ghosts who were right beside the river but then died of thirst and then were reborn to die again. Ayo. Okay, number 2 of our 10. Ready? 譬如有人与大会中昏睡安寝，忽然梦见须弥山顶，地势所住，善见大成，宫殿园林种种言好，天子天女百千万亿，普散天花，遍满其地，种种艺术，楚妙衣服，种种花树，开复妙花，诸音乐术，奏天音乐，天竺才女，各用美音，无量诸天，于众喜乐。Okay, number 2. Suppose a person in the assembly were to fall sound asleep and dream of seeing the great city of wholesome views on the summit of Mount Sumeru, where Lord Shakra dwells. He might dream of palaces, groves, parks, many decorations. He might dream of gods and goddesses by the hundreds of thousands of millions, universally scattering aloft celestial flowers and covering the ground. Many trees of garments bring forth wonderful robes. Many blossoming trees burst into luxuriant bloom. Many musical trees play celestial music. The celestial maidens sing beautiful melodies, and an immeasurable number of gods frolic in the midst of it. Okay. Whoa, we have left the realm of the hungry ghosts by where they're being devoured by raptors and wolves and suffering in their bodies from insufficient food and drink. And where have we gone? We've gone to the heavens. Here in the heavens, we're in the heaven of the 33 devas, Triastrimsha heaven, Sansha Santian. This is where Lord God lives, Shakra Devanam Indra. And look at the description. Whoa, palaces, groves, parks, decorations, gods and goddesses. What are their lives like? They send flowers that cover the ground. They scatter flowers. They live in places where clothing grows on trees, just the way you want the clothing to be, the right fabric, the right weight, the right cut, the right fashion. Trees blossom luxuriantly. Musical trees play celestial music, music so much better than anything we can find on earth. The celestial maidens sing beautiful melodies. Gods enjoy. It says frolic. What's the verb in Chinese? Yuzhong Shi Le. They play and enjoy. So how different this is from the realm of the devas, from the realm of the hungry ghosts. Now, what is it? It's a dream. It says, suppose somebody dreams of this. They see chakra, they see the devas, they see all the blessings, so different from the realm of the ghosts. Okay? But, let me get the but. Here we go. 其人自见着天衣服，普于其处， 住至周旋，起大会中，一切诸人随同一处，不知不见，何以故？梦中所见，非彼大众所能见故。The person sees himself wearing celestial robes everywhere, traveling to each of these places, stopping and mingling with them. All of the other people within the great assembly, although present in the same place, neither know nor see these things. Why is that? Because what the dreamer sees is a vision that the great assembly cannot behold. Okay. All right. Shall we? Let's see. Let's go over it step by step. Okay. So our dreamer sees himself wearing the robes that the devas wear, enjoying the things that the devas enjoy. In the dream, everything is as if he were a deva himself. How fine. However, within the assembly, present in the same place, nobody else knows or sees the things the person sees. Why is that? Because it's a dream and it's not shared. So what the dreamer sees is a vision that the assembly can't see. How sad that as they... Now, I want to remind folks that in the Mahayana, there's a series of, there's a way to look at all of the Buddha's teaching, all 49 years of his teaching, that divides it into time periods. And just like we mentioned earlier, the Lotus Nirvana period is the last one. The first one is called the Avatamsaka period. And the story goes that the Buddha taught this sutra for bodhisattvas and for devas. And the other disciples couldn't see it. And so he put it away and brought it out later because he knew that it would not be understood until people developed their own precepts, samadhi, and wisdom. So the Huayan Shiqi, this first period, the Avatamsaka period, was already spoken of as not universally accessible at the start. So here in our text, our dreamer is sharing things with the devas, but everybody else in the Great Assembly who didn't have those conditions cannot see it. Okay? Should we get the second half of the analogy here? He continues. Go on down to there. Here we go. All right. Last piece today. 一切菩萨世间诸往亦复如是，以九积极善根力故，发一切智广大愿故，学习一切佛功德故，修行菩萨庄严道故，圆满一切智智法故，满足普贤诸恒愿故，去入一切菩萨智地故，有悉一切菩萨所住，诸三昧故，亦能观察一切菩萨智慧境界，无障碍故。是故悉见如来世尊不可思议自在身边，一切声闻诸大弟子皆不能见，皆不能知，以无菩萨清净言故。Okay, here's the story. This is the second half of our second analogy for why members of the assembly didn't know what was going on right there in the Jade Grove. The states of the bodhisattvas and kings of the worlds were similar. They've accumulated the power of good roots for a very long time. They brought forth vast great vows to realize wisdom. They've studied the virtue of Buddhas and have cultivated the adorned path of a bodhisattva. They perfected the dharmas of the wisdom of omniscience. They perfected all the practices and vows of Samantabhadra. They've embodied the levels of wisdom of bodhisattvas. They playfully roamed in the samadhis where bodhisattvas abide. They can contemplate the bodhisattva states of wisdom without any obstruction. For such reasons, they behold the world-honored one's inconceivable spiritual transformations and self-mastery. Yet the great disciples, the Shravakas, could not see and could not know because they lacked the bodhisattva's purified eyes. Okay, so the dreamer sees all the wonderful things happening among the heavens, but others in the Great Assembly, because they don't see what the dreamer sees, are unable to experience it. Then it says, the bodhisattvas and kings of the worlds, who were also there at the start, have done these 10 things which allows them to see what are happening. What is it? They've accumulated good roots for a long time. They brought forth vows for wisdom. They've studied Buddha's virtues, and they've cultivated the path of the bodhisattva. They perfected the dharmas of the wisdom of omniscience, all the practices and vows of Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. They embodied the stages of wisdom of bodhisattvas. They themselves walked the path. They've playfully roamed in the samadhis where bodhisattvas abide. They contemplate the bodhisattva states of wisdom without any obstruction. That's why they saw what the Buddha wanted them to see. Incredible spiritual self-mastery, spiritual transformations and self-mastery. And the Shravakas didn't know. They didn't have the bodhisattva's purified eyes. Okay, that's different. Now, I said I wanted to share in this converted mattress factory in the Mission District in San Francisco from the end of 1970 to 1976 and beyond, when we moved to City of 10,000 Buddhas, and Gold Mountain Monastery left that facility and moved into Chinatown. Master Hua explained the sutras every night and twice on weekends. And the experience of Shifu's lectures, first of all, the point that we were there, we thought we were Zen meditators. We were there for meditation, and here was a Zen master, a Chan master. Well, he was, no doubt. And we did 3 hours a day. We sat for hours, 60-minute incense sticks 3 times a day without fail. And yet, that wasn't the limit of his teaching. He also said, this is important. I want you to understand this. I am making scholar practitioners. You can both practice the Dharma, but you can also explain it. And furthermore, I'm going to teach it to you without the filter of commentaries, because the standard Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese way of approaching sutras was you don't go directly. You have to go through a commentary, because, well, we're not really qualified to know what the Buddha said directly. Only the ancients understood. So we have to read. And Shifu said that we love commentaries. We respect commentaries. We read them and investigate them and set them to one side and let the Buddha's voice ring. You have all you need to understand the Buddha's voice directly. Don't feel that somehow it's reserved for who? Who is the Buddha's voice being reserved for? The ancients, the Tang Dynasty, 1400 years ago? You need the Buddha's voice in your life today. You need it like you need a mirror to see how you look. You need it like you need a blueprint to understand how to build a building that won't fall down. You need the Buddha's voice like you need a map so that you can get to your destination safely, not waste time. This is what sutras are, and I'm going to explain them to you for 90 minutes a day with translation. So we would be there, and we're like, okay, if this Shifu, whatever you say, you're going to listen. This is what I want you to understand. We're getting the Buddha Dharma off on the right foot in the West, and it's based upon understanding what the Buddha said. Did you know that we have a record of what the Buddha said? Do you know that the Tripitaka is here? That we have the sutras, we have commentaries, and we have the Vinaya? He said, yeah, open it up. The standard thing to do is, if you're in a traditional way of approaching the Buddha's sutras, is you get a big glass door cabinet. It's taller than you are, and it opens up very beautifully with glass doors, and 100 volumes, all of them in a row, perfectly dust-free, and sadly fingerprint-free, because nobody opens it to ask, nobody tries to read it. And then, mind you, it's limited further because you open it up, and here is Chinese characters, top to bottom, right to left, not left to right and horizontal. So if you don't speak Chinese, you might hold it in your hands, but it doesn't speak to you. You don't know what it says. Furthermore, what people do mostly, they say, oh, no, we open the sutras and we recite them. They recite them. They don't investigate them. So that's good. That's all good to have the sounds in the air. But if you don't understand it and you've only gone through it, and when people recite, boy, they go lickety-split. Duck, 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 with a wooden fish. Sherpa said, that's all good. We're going to let the Buddha's voice be heard. We want to understand. So he would explain a passage. We would translate it into English after recording it on a Sony reel-to-reel tape recorder. And then after we explained it, Sherpa would say, 谁有什么问题没有啊? 你们如果没有问题，我就问你们问题哦. Says, who has any questions? If you don't have any questions, I'm going to ask you questions. So you better ask. Who didn't understand what we said? And he would take the passage that he explained during that lecture and say, translate this into English, hand it out, study it for tomorrow's lecture. So we did. We got a system going where we would translate, not skillfully, not polished, but just raw translation, and hand it to people in a printout, a mimeo. We had mimeo machines, ka-chunk, 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 like that. And then we would prepare for tomorrow. And when we got to the end of the lecture, the end of the passage, the end of the chapter, the end of the text, we would publish it as a translation. So this was Master Hua's vow, to bring the Buddha's teachings to the West in languages we can understand. Okay, so far so good. While Shifu was lecturing, I can only speak for my experience, but there were all kinds of things going on that were unexplainable. One of these things that happened was people would all say, somehow Shifu knows my secrets, and tonight he was talking directly to me, and I don't know how he knew that, but I'm really embarrassed, and it's embarrassing, Because why? Master Hua would talk in his commentary about situations that people sitting side by side, each interpreted as Shifu giving them a specific teaching, how to solve a problem, or letting you know that he knew what you had done that you weren't letting on about, or he was giving you just the piece that you missed to really understand. That somehow in the analogies that he used, the story that he told, it just connected things that had previously been disconnected. And there was the missing puzzle piece, and people would go, whoa, that, I get it, And yet the person right beside you was hearing the very same text, the very same story, in a very different way, with a different click to it, a different lock opening, or a different mirror facing you, if that was where you were. So many people experienced that and said, how did Shifu know that that's what I needed to hear, right? And the person beside, how did Shifu know that I did that, you know? Amazing how that would happen. And then these things would happen in the pauses for translation. Master Hua would lecture for 10 minutes, and then he would wait while we ran the tape back and then punched the button, and Shifu said, da, 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 you know, stop, and then play it ahead and stop. Shifu would be sitting beside us on the Dharma seat, and he would be doing nobody knows quite what, but it was very active. Shifu would be, sometimes he would have his beads, but mostly he would just be reciting, and then he would put his palms together, and sometimes he would blow puffs of air. Sometimes he would make mudras, and Shifu was doing whatever Shifu did. And we would be focusing on listening to the lecture. But he, in the gaps between translation, was very busy and doing things. And it was people we would hear later, somebody would say, oh, my grandmother here in Hong Kong was, the doctors had given up on her. And yet she was reciting the Buddha's name, and there was this light in the room, and she took a deep breath and just came back into focus. And where was Shifu while this was going on? I know Shifu was lecturing. That was funny. We saw him in the room. You know, we saw him at the foot of the bed. You know, and so these kind of things would happen. And then occasionally Shifu would say things like, "Oh," he said, I see Sun Wukong has come tonight. Monkey of Journey to the West is here, and I just have to, he's really mischievous, and I have to like tell him, not while the lecture's going on. We're going, but Shifu, that's a fictional character from a novel from the Ming Dynasty. He says, no, you don't understand. And then, Shifu, what? And he'd say, never mind. And then he would say, oh, Sudana is here listening to the sutra. He's right there. You all didn't see him? You know, oh, all right. And go, Shifu? Yeah. And then he would say things like, hearing about the hungry ghosts who were there by the riverbank and suffering. I remember a similar kind of story where we were busy, doing all the things that you do when you live in an urban monastic community with a lot of former hippies who are in their 20s and full of piss and vinegar and full of energy. And we're supposed to, at 6:30, show up in the Buddha Hall with our robes on, light the incense, do the first bows, incense praise, Amitabha Sutra, and do evening ceremony, recite the Buddha's name, in preparation for lecture at 7:30. So when, you've got this group of men and women all doing their translations, all doing their things that we do, sometimes we wouldn't get there quite at 6:30. Be a little late to get things going, kick off the ceremony. And then you get a little more casual, and it's now 6:35, 6:37, and so I remember the time that we came down, and here was Shifu standing in front of the incenser that we used to start the ceremony, looking at his watch and shaking his head and saying, "You all just don't get it. Don't you see?" He said, "Can't you see them?" And we're like, Shifu? He said, "Don't you know?" He said, "There are I can't tell you, uncountable numbers of ghosts and spirits who depend on the incense and the sound of the instruments and the chanting of the sutras to cross over. They wait. They're here kneeling in front of the censer with tears in their eyes because it hurts so much. And where were you? You say, you're out there driving around San Francisco. He said, you're lazy. You're condemning these ghosts to suffering. How can you be so uncompassionate? Right? But Sherpa, we didn't see them. He said, clearly they're here. Be on time. How come my disciples like this? He said. And he walked away up to the third floor to get ready to lecture. And so we're like, maybe we should be on time. So there are differences in seeing and hearing right within the same assembly. And we were clueless. And if we didn't have a good and wise teacher like Master Hua to remind us that there's so much more going on than meets the eye. And there was a phrase floating around the monastery at the time. They say something like, the things happening right before you are not true and real. The true and real things going on are invisible. So, but we who are still completely bound up in duality and who only have these eyes to see, I have great sympathy for the Shravakas there in the Buddha's assembly in the Jada Grove who were unable to see all of the marvelous things going on right before their eyes that were closed to them. So we'll be back next week with analogies 8, I don't know if we'll get to 10. They're shorter as we go. Maybe we'll finish them. To describe the reality of what was going on. When the Buddha spoke the Avatamsaka Sutra, not everyone could hear it. So I'll take a break at this point and invite Jinwei Shi, who is in Berkeley, to tell us a little bit. Hey there, Jinwei Shi.
Hello there, Master. Hello, everyone.
Hi, I'm going to bring up the website. You want to tell us anything that's going on here?
Of course, yeah. I'm very happy to update everyone what's going on here in the monastery. And we'll start with an announcement about a short break from the online practices. This upcoming week, start tomorrow until Saturday, we will not stream our daily ceremonies, morning, noon recitation, and evening ceremony. So from you can read on the website April 16 to April 22nd, Saturday. So we resume our practices on Sunday morning, April 23rd. We recommend for those who follow those practices to find recordings on our YouTube channel and maintain these practices. We will do on the away where we will be traveling, so we're not able to stream them for this week. If you look it up, the first announcement is that Abhayagiri monks, after their winter retreat, are returning and offered their first Tuesday Dhamma, tea and Dhamma, and then the evening lecture is happening on the first Tuesday every month, and it will be a first time after the COVID, so they return after almost 3 years.
Yeah,
and definitely highly recommend it. So this is going to happen in May 2nd. And 5 p.m. is the tea time, a kind of informal discussion, opportunity to ask questions to monks, and 7:30 to 9:45 is the Dhamma talk. So this is going to happen on May 2nd. And we have a retreat going, a bit further, the mindfulness to heartfulness. There's still few places, so those who are considering to join, really encouraging to sign a WhatsApp from June 3rd to 10th, and will be held by our senior teachers, the Nun, their Master Chur, Doug Powers, and Marty Verhoeven, Professor Marty Verhoeven. And we have upcoming, so tomorrow, actually, their master will be another class of Avatamsaka. We have 3 Avatamsaka lectures on the road. So Friday was yesterday, Professor Marty Verhoeven. And right now we have another Avatamsaka class, and tomorrow will be another lecture. But you can connect with the lecture Transferences chapter. And this will be a Zoom link. We have Zoom link, and also people can join from the City of 10,000 Buddhas live channel. So this is going to happen tomorrow, 7:30 California time. And I think this is probably it for today. So again, will be no streaming ceremonies for upcoming week, and see you pretty soon. And we return to our normal schedule, everyday schedule.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Jungwei. Appreciate that. The monks at the Berkeley Monastery are on they're doing their Canfang, traveling to find good teachers, going to other Buddhist monasteries in America to spread to increase the connection between the Mahayana and Theravada. Master Hua and Ajahn Sumedho were close Dharma friends when they were alive, when Master Hua was alive, and we have continued our connection to our Dharma brothers and sisters in the Theravada tradition. And Bhikkhu Bodhi will be coming to California in May, and we have in July we have joint Mahayana Theravada ordination ceremony happening, so that the monks who do the ordaining come from both Thailand, Sri Lanka, Korea, China, Taiwan, and U.S. And Vietnam as well. So that's certainly interestingly that the sutra is talking about Shravakas and Bodhisattvas having differences in seeing and hearing, and when we're down in the realm of reality here, in ordinary dual reality, we are doing our best to heal that split, so that everybody gets the Bodhisattva resolve, so that our side wins. No, not that way. Okay, and in the coming weeks, we will have announcements from Gold Coast Dharma Realm as well. Somebody said last week, since you announced BBM, why not also talk about what's happening here in the Gold Coast? We will have a Refuges and Precepts ceremony on Buddha's birthday, and there's a lot of events coming up. So starting next week, we'll be announcing our events at Gold Coast Dharma Realm as well. Alrighty, so should we, let's see here. I want to share a good karma music story. Good deed. After the rain in the morning, the earthworms crawled out of the mud, but they couldn't crawl back after being stepped on by passers-by. I picked up 2 injured earthworms I encountered and sent them back to the garden, prolonging their lives and aerating the soil. Thank you, Chinjaya from Seattle. How wonderful. So that's a good deed, posted on dharmaradio.org, and we were happy to send some Buddhist music to Chinjaya for that good deed. Please do your own good deed, posted on dharmaradio.org, and we will tell your story as well. Here is one way to be sure that the next time the Buddha speaks the Avatamsaka, you're there seeing everything that the Bodhisattvas see. This comes from dedicating merit, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva's practice. Okay, here we go. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. And we'll conclude by bowing to the Buddhas. Please feel free to join. If you're sitting in a chair, you can do 3 half bows like me. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. That's going to do it for us for this week.